Welcome back to Tranquility du Jour. I'm your host, Kimberly Wilson, bringing you tranquility since 2005. And can you believe it? We are almost to our 500th episode. Craziness. Today, we are talking about money mindset in general, budgeting, tools to help us grow, and more with success coach Menellia Valcent. I'm so excited to share this episode with you. And before we dive in, I wanted to share a few things that are happening. So first of all, TDJ Live is Sunday, June 21st at 8 p.m. Eastern Time. So those of you who have been around a bit, you know that this is our seasonal free 1-hour online gathering that I offer. It's just kind of like a tune-up, a check-in, a way to reflect, connect, and ideally make a difference for ourselves within our communities and beyond. So save the date and please join us. And there is a link to sign up for this in the show notes, which can be found at kimberlywilson.com/493. Also, just a heads up, so go ahead and put this on your calendar. The TDJ Brunch with a side of Tranquility that I had scheduled for early June has been rescheduled now to July 11th, and that's going to happen noon to 1 p.m. Eastern Time. And you will find information on that over in the show notes, and then next week I'll have a link for you to sign up for that once we get through TDJ Live, which I'm just so excited to share that with you. It's always so fun to connect during, at the start of each season. And then lastly, I want to give a heads up just to save the date about my next kind of offering that is going to be a mid-year salon. So a mid-year check-in. It's going to be from 10 a.m. to 3 p.m. with a 1-hour lunch break. But the idea is, how do we look at 2020, right? Which I know has been kind of a crazy year, and to really ask ourselves, okay, what have I learned? How am I growing? What do I want? What can I take away from this experience to move forward? And then, of course, there will be the typical yoga and mindfulness and art inclusion in this process. So save the date, and I'm going to share a bit about it along with a little bonus for it on TDJ Live Sunday night. Again, that'll be July 18th. The other thing I want to mention is over in the TDJ Tranquility du Jour Insiders Facebook group, we're reading White Fragility and discussing it, and would love to have you join the conversation. Even if you just read the foreword or the introduction, or you're just on chapter 1, that's okay. I finished the book on Saturday and then immediately went on to Facebook to start with the questions. And I would love your input. I would love to hear kind of your thoughts around it. And my hope is that, with this, it allows us to become more aware, which it was super eye-opening for me, and also to take action. Because what is it that we can do to manifest change and, to really kind of question ourselves, our beliefs, and, and then bring that out into the world in a more enlightened and, accepting way. There's so much to learn. And I really found this to be a great intro. So just a reminder that I've started back the Tranquility du Jour online book club. My goodness, this was super popular like 10 years ago. I did it for 10. I did it, back in like 2010, maybe I started it, maybe 2009. And I did it for probably 4 years. And every month I would choose a new book. Well, we're going to get back to that. And this month's book is White Fragility. I'm thinking a possibility for the next one, with June being Pride Month, is to read Untamed by Glennon Doyle. So that's just a thought. It's definitely not official, but I'm wondering what you guys think of that, if you would be interested. So I guess we would kind of have 2 months for June, but maybe we would start Glennon's at the end of the month so that we can really kind of focus on White Fragility here, and then move into this being our next book, again with an eye towards focusing and highlighting and amplifying LGBTQ voices. So if that appeals to you, please let me know. And again, a reminder, join the TDJ Facebook Insiders group. I would love to have you. And there is a link in the show notes, which again, kimberlywilson.com/493. Okay, one more thing. I There's always one more thing. The 500th episode, that is going to happen in August. And I'm just wondering, like, what would be a super fun way to, socially distanced way to kind of celebrate this and acknowledge it. So I'm thinking maybe like a live podcast, maybe me and Tim and Gizmo the pug. I'm not sure. I would love your feedback. If there's anything that you're like, I want this for the 500th episode, please let me know. You can find me hello@KimberlyWilson.com. I'm so excited to share this episode with you. Let's jump in. Okay, Menellia. She's a success coach teaching and supporting women to unleash their full potential in their work while cultivating a life filled with passion, pleasure, and vibrant energy. She spent the last 3 years working with and teaching thousands of global women how to shift their mindsets and lives after their quarter-life crisis. During this time, she's garnered publications and live interviews on things such as Thrive Global, Huffington Post, Business Focus magazine. Now, she's also trained for a year in high-performance coaching and strategy, online business coaching, and more. Her approach to coaching is a mix of personal mastery, sensuality, self-care, and life exploration. When she's not writing or coaching, she spends her time indulging in French TV series, listening to cafe jazz, I like that, or absorbing some style inspiration from bloggers. Her life slogan is to be your own lifestyle connoisseur. To grab a free gift from Menellia, visit menelliavalcent.com/gift. And that is MENELLIAVALCENT.com/gift. Now, if you're like, that is too fast, I can't remember all that, no worries. Just go to the show notes and you can click a link. Makes it easy peasy. All right, here's Menellia. Welcome, Menellia.
Hi, thanks for having me. I'm delighted to be here today.
It's a treat to have you. And so tell me, or tell our listeners, where you are tuning in from.
I am from the beautiful Caribbean island of St. Lucia. So I'm currently listening to the background noise of the birds. It's sunny outside right now, but I'm from the Caribbean islands.
Beautiful, because it's been a little snowy and rainy and cold here where I am. So I've got a little bit of envy going on.
I do not envy you.
Now tell us a little bit, what's the inspiration behind your business, kind of overall brand and mission? And, can you actually, before we dive into, this inspiration piece, I'm curious, can you give our listeners a little bit about you?
So I am from the Caribbean island, as you already know. I started my blog, just on a whim. It was something to help me journal out. I was not very orally expressive, and someone suggested to start writing. So I became very passionate about writing and blogging. And through that's how I, figured out what I wanted to do. But on the regular day-to-day, I have a 9-to-5 job as a marketing coordinator for a group of companies. I don't love going to the beach, surprisingly, even though I do live in the Caribbean. I think because I'm always surrounded by it, it's not really my go-to thing, but I much rather love escaping to the city. I love having a cafe jazz at my home in the background, candles. I'm just an at-home girl, very chill, very relaxed. But when the work calls, I'm very head on.
And so tell us a little bit about what it is that you're offering and kind of bringing to the world. So you talk a bit about mindset, wealth, results. Tell us a little bit about that.
So these were all things that I never had someone teach me about. And when I first started my business, the coaching industry was actually booming at the time. That was 2016 thereabouts. And everyone was talking about mindset and money and all those different things. And I'm like, but I'm trying all those different things, but I'm not getting anywhere. And then I sat down and I realized, okay, you know what? Maybe it's not the actual action. Maybe it was something that I had to change on the inside. And as I went through different questions that were being given to me through coaches, I realized that, okay, there's something more than just, doing the practical work. So I started to dive into the personal development world, and I started to practice, manifesting and, creating goals that I thought would never actually, manifest until it did. And I'm like, okay, but what did I do that was different than before? And I realized it was my way of thinking and my habits and the way that I looked at things, my perspective on everything. And when it came to the wealth portion, wealth was something that it was a huge transition because I found that when I started to create bigger goals, the wealth, like the requirement for more income or wanting that experience of living a more luxurious or more wealthier lifestyle, that started to scare me. And I'm like, okay, what is going on here? Like, why am I afraid to actually go into that path? And, the more I went into it, I realized it's because of my programming and what I was taught and what I was used to. And the fact that I had been able to change that, I was like, you know what? I wish that someone would have told me that 10 years ago, because I think that I would be in a completely different environment. But of course, we go through our own journeys for a reason at a certain pace. And I think now, based on the calls and the community that I've developed to build, a lot of the questions that they ask, or when I do the surveys, it is about their way of thinking or their fear, or things are too expensive, or they're not worthy of that. So my mission is to help them change that.
And how do you help people change that? Because I'm sure a lot of listeners can relate to this, right? It's like, well, I've tried all the things they say to do online, but yet I still feel, the same. Yeah. And so this idea of manifesting, I think it's, and particularly with regard to wealth or finances, I'm, a bit unclear, I think, on how you encourage, or one encourages people to make changes there.
It definitely is unique to everybody. One thing that I like to do is to help persons do an analysis of their life. So anytime I have a coaching call with a client, whether it be a colleague or someone I've never met in my life, the first thing that I try to do is to help them understand like where they are right now. Because unless you really understand where you are, like in the detail form, you can't really have a clarified blueprint of what you're trying to create. So the first stage that I always go into is to understand the big picture as it is. And of course, to accept that, because sometimes we're like, okay, my life is okay. But then when we see it on a whiteboard, I love using whiteboards. It's like, oh, I didn't realize that it's not so okay. And the second part of that is to help them really define what their goals are based on their own motivation. I think, what we're used to is trying to create goals based on what we see other persons doing. But again, I have worked in the sales environment for Xerox, and one thing that we were taught when we had to put our values out there was to help ensure that the customer, the motivation behind them wanting to buy the product or them wanting to create change in their workspace is to ensure that the driver is themselves. So I've incorporated that into the coaching aspect to ensure that the client or the person or the woman that I'm teaching, or even via a blog post, their desire to change is because they really truly want to. And for them to understand that is to help them visualize, like, okay, what is my life going to be like in a different scenario? Not based on what I'm seeing around me, but based on what I think that I would really truly enjoy. And that was how I actually manifested my biggest goals. It was because I said, you know what, I'm just so tired of going through the same cycle over and over again. And even long before it even manifested, one of my biggest goals was to go to Paris. And before I even thought about actually creating that goal, to me, it was very expensive. It was impossible. So I tried to kind of get a feeling of what it would feel like by spending time on Google Maps and spending my free time on apartment websites and reading the blogs. And I'm like, oh, this is really good. I wish I could do that. And as time progressed, I realized that it is definitely something that I want. And I started to put in place different measures to help me get there. So the process for me is getting the client to understand where they are right now. And then secondly, understanding, okay, where do I want to get to based on what will really feel good to me, not what I'm being told or what I see around. And then start incorporating different tools and different habits on a consistent basis in order to get there. And of course, it has to be consistent because if you start and you stop, then it's going to be back to square one.
I love this. And I think it's so important to remember looking at, okay, where am I right now? And what is it do I want? And, I think for a lot of people, this can be tricky. It's,
Yes, it can be. It can be.
to pause and be like, okay, where am I right now? I do this thing that I encourage called a seasonal life review. It's basically like a wheel of life, right? Where we look at where are we, right? How satisfied am I in these areas? And sometimes we're like, semi-satisfied, but it's fine. And then others were like, I'm definitely not as satisfied as I would like to be, right? And so whenever you talk about these tools and habits, can you share some of your favorites with our listeners?
As you mentioned, the Wheel of Life, I love that tool. I use it in every single session. That is one of my favorite tools. I also love journaling. I think if you can, when we're trying to change our lifestyle or our reality, saying that we want something different, saying it out loud can feel very like, okay, I'm just saying it, it's wishful thinking. But then when you start to write it out as if it's like a story that you've already experienced, it becomes so much more um, somewhat real, even though it's not yet there yet. Like you haven't manifested it yet. It hasn't happened as yet. And and one thing that I love doing is to just give questions to help the clients or even myself go deeper into the story to imagine like, okay, you know what? If I'm in a relationship that I'm not really fulfilled by, and I would love, and I'm trying to get this other person to see me, to acknowledge me, to, receive me, etc. And then one day I'm like, you know what? What would feel like if I had the perfect relationship? And I start to think about that and write about that and go into it deeper and remind myself about that every single day. Then eventually it will become like, you know what? If I can think about that, then definitely I can start putting those measures in place to help me create it. So two of my favorite tools are the Wheel of Life. That's the first thing that we go through. And then secondly is giving the journaling questions to help write out a story. And there's one tool that I do where you write a letter to yourself 1 year from now. I have been practicing this for like 7 years. And usually when I ask a client, okay, where do you want to be 1 year from now? Sometimes they say that they don't know. I don't know. But then when they sit down and they just like give themselves the space and permission to just let go of all the things that are telling them that they can't do it or it's not for them, it's surprising to them that, oh, I didn't realize that I actually want that. So if you're writing out a different story, you get to create the story into your reality. But first, you have to give yourself the space to understand that there is a different chapter that's out there for you. And the first step is for you to highlight the key elements of that chapter and then make it a consistent habit to bring into your everyday environment little things that are going to help you feel it and create it.
And so, how has this worked for you? Can you give us some examples in your own life of how you've implemented these tools?
So the Wheel of Life, I did it. The first time I did it was in 2017. That was when I first invested in coaching. And the first half of the year, I was drained every single day, especially coming into the work environment. I'd wake up in the morning, I'd be excited. And then the minute I stepped in front of the building, I would literally feel like all the energy was sucked out of my body. And then when I did the exercise, one of the things that we had to highlight was where have you been given control to other people and or where have you been given your control? And I noticed that a lot of the areas, like 90% of the different areas, the career, the money, the relationship, the health, I was not really taking control of those areas. And it really made me understand why I was feeling drained constantly. And having that bigger picture helped me start taking that action. So the second part is where I started to write out my story. So I would wake up every single day and I would write out a letter to myself or I'd write out a story. I'm waking up in Paris. I'm sitting next to this very beautiful window. I love Paris. And I'm drinking coffee. I have, different little elements. And what I started to do was actually incorporate it into my own home. And I would buy pillows that would have the Eiffel Tower and I would play cafe jazz and I would go to the spa and I would, buy flowers, like simple little things. And then as time progressed, because I was already writing the story constantly, I wasn't really paying attention to it, like, okay, I'm just like laser focused on this. But it was other people who were recognizing it and they were telling me, oh, this has changed about you. Oh, I saw this item and I thought of you one time, so they'd buy it for me. And it was like, oh, now I realize that I'm actually bringing those things into my space. And now it's like, oh, wow, I didn't realize that I was doing it, but subconsciously. That was just a few examples. And then the career path. One thing that I really wanted to do was to change my career path. And initially, I was like, okay, I'm going to stay in the same administrative field until my blogging actually gave me the opportunity to get a promotion in the same company. So I was on vacation, and because I was always blogging, I was writing emails, I was doing the social media, all that stuff. I was on vacation. When I got back to the office, the first thing he told me was, oh, the marketing manager is resigning and we think you're the perfect candidate for it. You were recommended. I'm like, but I didn't go to marketing school. So, these little practical hobbies that you're doing every single day, they pave the space for me to actually be where I am right now. But it was not something that I was like forcefully trying to create. It was just the fact that I realized that, okay, things are not the way that I would love for it to be. And I started to implement little shifts. And eventually I got to a space that I'm completely content right now.
Yeah, I think the little shifts piece is a great reminder. And also the
Mm-hmm.
tapping into, okay, ultimately, what do I want? Or ultimately, what isn't necessarily working as I would like it to?
Mm-hmm.
And
Yep, definitely.
what would you say for listeners who are like, I'm pretty content with how things are right now? What is something that is useful for them?
I think it's very important to be content for sure, but also I think it's important to ask yourself, okay, what other content is one thing, but are you really truly enjoying your life? Are you waking up every single day with that energy, with that clarity, with that excitement? And when you come back home, do you end your day with dread, or do you end your day with like, oh, it was a very good day. Now I can sit down and relax. Or do you feel this anxiety, like, okay, what am I gonna do tomorrow? Or I have to wake up tomorrow. I think using the word content and okay, being okay is kind of sort of being lazy term, for lack of a better word, because there's always another level. And unless most times persons are not given the opportunity or they're not asked what exactly do they want or what would make my life better or what would make me more energized by what I'm doing every single day, they're not really given that opportunity. So they're going throughout the day with just the regular mundane routine. So I would tell them, ask yourself, what other area can I improve or what small tweak can I add to my life right now to help me just create a mild shift. And if they consistently do that, then as time progresses, it is going to get so much better than content, so much better than content. And you will wake up 3 years from now and you're like, oh, I'm no longer in that same space that I was 3 years ago, even though I was in an okay space, but my life is better because I did small things.
What are some small things that you would recommend that you're like, these are some things that really can help elevate one's level of contentment?
Mm-hmm. One thing that I would highlight is the content that you're consuming every single day. We're mindlessly on our phones, we're watching TV, we're listening to music in the background, and sometimes we're not really aware that it's an okay space to be in, but it kind of limits us. For example, um, a reality TV. I used to watch a reality show that a lot of curse words in there. It was exciting. I was happy with the show, but I didn't realize that I was emulating the curse words and all the negative energy and the negative habits from there. So one area that I can suggest is watch the media that you're consuming daily. Are you consuming too many of them? Maybe you have too many subscriptions in your newsletter box and you're like, okay, I'm going to check this later. It's just small things, cleaning out the clutter, taking better care of yourself, even though it's just, you know, buying yourself some flowers on a weekend. It doesn't have to be every single month, but just the one thing that you're waiting for someone else to do for you, do it for yourself. So you have to recognize for yourself, what do you want or what are you trying to get someone else or waiting for someone else to do for you, and just do it for yourself. It will be different for everyone, but again, when you start to get clearer on the story and what you're creating, then the little elements that you would need to highlight, they will stand out for you. And then that's where the small things come from, the little story, the stories that you write to yourself.
Yeah, it is really kind of all about the little things.
Yes, it is.
Now, what would you give? What sort of advice would you give to anyone who's listening who's struggling with a transition kind of right now in their life?
It's going to be okay, definitely. I remember my transition, that was 2012. I was crying every single day. I was like, why me? Why me? Like, I did everything right. What is going on? But I didn't, honestly, at the time, I felt like it would never end. And if I had someone tell me back then that it was going to be better, I just needed to be patient. The challenges come with the journey, but you just have to constantly work on yourself, no matter how small. Every single day, you have to be available for a small growth. It doesn't have to be a huge milestone. It just might be waking up today and getting dressed, or putting that lipstick on, or taking the bus, or whatever it is, taking a walk outside. My advice to them will be to embrace the challenge. And instead of focusing on the challenge itself, ask yourself questions like, okay, what can I learn from this? What lesson is this teaching me? Maybe it's an inspiration to change the way that we're looking at things, like shift just your perspective on the challenge and understand that it's part of life. Because the more you remain focused on the actual problem, then the solution will never be visible to you. So I would tell anyone right now who's listening to this, who is currently going through some challenging phase, it's going to be better. It is definitely going to be better, but you just need to have patience and shift the way that you're looking at the challenge. Instead of focusing on it as a problem, ask yourself, what lessons can I learn from this? Or what solution is this trying to lead me to? So that would be my best advice, I think.
Yeah, I think it's such a great reminder. It's all about reframing, right? You know?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Challenges to growth opportunities, right? But sometimes you're like, I have had enough growth opportunities for now.
So true, so true. So true. But again, it's something that we might have not yet worked on. It might be something that is still on the line that we have not targeted. And it's just like, oh, for example, when the money story, which is why I love talking about wealth. I didn't realize that I was spending money on unhealthy foods, and I was not really paying attention to where my money was going. And I was like, why am I always broke? I'm working every single day. Why am I always broke? But I was like, okay, I need to get a better job. I need to make more money. But I started to look at it different and say, you know what? Maybe I need to pay attention to where I'm spending. And the way that I did it was by collecting every single receipt for just 1 month, and then sitting down at the end of the month and tabulating. And that was where I realized, oh, you're wasting money in all those areas that are unnecessary. And that gave me the space to start changing it. So again, once you shift the way that you're looking at the problem, then you will start to see better solutions for it.
Yeah. So would you encourage listeners who are, wanting to maybe have a little bit more extra left over at the end of the month? Like, right. Because I think everyone would be like, oh, well, if I just made more money, but it's like, is that really the answer? And so,
yeah.
What would you recommend? I mean, it sounds like paying attention to where it's going is one of them.
Paying attention to where it's going, budgeting. I cook a lot. So it's all about shifting. There's nothing wrong with spending, but I think it has to do with mindful spending. And that will require, for example, I budget. I know exactly where every cent is going every single month. I track my finances. And again, it's creating healthier money habits. Because we now have those debit cards. You just go out and you just swipe. It's like, okay, I know there's money on there, so I'm gonna swipe. And at the end of the month, you're like, oh, but when did that even happen? So mindful spending is definitely one of the key things that you have to incorporate if you want to elevate the way that the amount of money, not just money financially, but the entire wealth aspect or wealth concept. Because if you're just spending frivolously, if you're not really paying attention to what's going on with your money, then eventually you will get yourself into a space of debt or very negative money ratio. And because of the mindlessness around it, we don't pay attention. And when it gets to the point of, oh my God, when did that happen? then it's a wake-up call. So practicing mindful spending can definitely help.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it is interesting to look at, okay, at the end of the month, because there's this great little cafe across the street from my office that has this like fresh squeezed orange juice. It's like $5, right? But I love it. It's like this big cup of it. And I do that and I'm like, oh my gosh, by the end of the month, that's like $100, right? If I'm doing my math properly. And it's just like, Lordy. So it is interesting how these just little baby indulgences, they add up.
They add up. Yeah. I saw this quote yesterday on WhatsApp. Someone posted Amazon always tell you it's only $5 or it's like $5.99, and they were like, this $5.99 mentality has probably cost me like $10,000 by now, because we don't see it as a big amount. It adds up.
Exactly.
It adds up.
It does. Well, my last question for you is, the name of this podcast is Tranquility du Jour. So I'm curious for you, how are you finding tranquility in your everyday, in your beautiful, tranquil space that you live?
Every single day, when I get home in the night, the first thing that I do is put on Cafe Jazz and I boil myself a cup of tea every single evening. I have a cup of tea right now. And before bed, I always put on this sleep meditation, but it's like running water, just to calm my mind. Because if I don't do that, then my mind is going to be like going crazy. Like, okay, I should probably do this or write this down. I'll never get into this space of just relaxation. So go-to to help me just mellow down and relax at home is the cup of tea in the evening and the Cafe Jazz and the sleep meditation music. That has been helping me for the last 2 years, for sure. I wake up so much more energized in the morning, and instead of me drinking, wine every single night, which I used to do, by the way, or I would drink coffee or orange juice, not oranges, sorry, sodas, or like anything sweet. I just have a nice cup of tea, chamomile or vanilla and chamomile and honey, put my Cafe Jazz on, and I just get into this relaxing space. And of course, I love opening a nice book or a magazine, and I just like fall asleep and wake up at 5 a.m. the next morning.
And do it all over again.
Exactly.
Exactly. Well, thank you so much for being here with us today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me. It was fun.
In the show notes, you'll find a link to Menellia's Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube. And then finally, let's connect. So as I mentioned, would love to have you over in the TDJ Insiders Facebook group. There is a link. Share resources, get inspiration, make connections, and join the online book club. Also, if you have a moment to share a review of this podcast on iTunes, would be so grateful. And to find more episodes, like 492 of them, go to KimberlyWilson.com/podcast. And there's also an app for iPhones and Androids that you can download so that you always have it with you on the go. Of course, you can also subscribe. That way you never miss an episode. And then be sure to sign up for weekly love notes. So this is just a little dose of love straight to your inbox that includes invites, inspiration, and more. And there's a link for that. It's also KimberlyWilson.com/love notes, and they go out typically on Tuesdays. So be sure to sign up if you're not already on the list, and you'll be the first to know when things are happening and going on. There's also a link to my 6 books, ways to find me on social, and then finally, a link to TranquiliT, my locally sewn, eco-friendly fashion line. Thank you so much for tuning in. Thank you for inviting me and my guest into your day. I wish you a beautiful, tranquil week ahead. Namaste.